Well, actor Alec Baldwin has been charged now with involuntary manslaughter in the death of cinematographer on the set of the movie Rust in New Mexico. Joining us now to break down the charges and get some legal context is Buffalo defense attorney Barry Covert. Barry, obviously this is a high-profile case and some pretty serious charges. Question one, how serious are they, and is anything different in New Mexico versus the charges here in New York State?
Alec Baldwin is facing up to 18 months incarceration for a fourth-degree felony in New Mexico. They have a different labeling system, but it's essentially the equivalent or lesser than our lowest felony, which is an E felony. And there are significant differences between their homicide statute and New York's, and this case exemplifies that. In New York State, the closest homicide would be criminally negligent homicide, but it is not as low of a threshold to prove as the prosecution has in New Mexico against Alec Baldwin for involuntary manslaughter. All they have to do to establish involuntary manslaughter, which has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, is establish that even though he engaged in a lawful act where that act might result in a murder or a death, he did not use due caution and circumspection given the circumstances. We don't have that in New York. Our criminally negligent homicide, which has a maximum incarceration of 1 1/3 to 4 in New York, as opposed to 18 months in New Mexico, requires that there be a reckless deviation of the standard of care that an average citizen would have under those circumstances. It must be blameworthy conduct. We have a much higher standard in New York for our lowest level homicide offense. So there is a vast difference. But Mr. Baldwin is facing this jeopardy because the lowest level offense, which the fourth-degree felony, which he faces, does permit this type of a situation to be charged and indicted. Still must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Really, the prosecutors had no choice here, really. I mean, someone died as a result of being shot on the set. So some charges had to be brought, right?
It does make sense that some charges had to be brought. He was the person who possessed the gun. It did go off. He claims he didn't pull the trigger, and that'll be an issue for the trial. But it was obviously pointed at an individual, and all of us gun owners know you never point a gun at an individual. You have the ultimate responsibility, the person who's holding the gun, to make sure that that gun is empty or is not able to be fired. Now, his defense is that he was handed a weapon. And he was told it's a cold weapon. But the question for the jury is going to be, is that enough? Is that sufficient for his defense? Did he have an additional obligation to check the weapon himself?
Right. Well, the second armorer on the set did take a plea in this case. What do you think this will happen as a result of this case? Do you think he'll end up being found guilty?
I believe that the proof is going to come in pretty strong against him, given his responsibility as the person holding the gun and having pointed it at an individual. And the jury has to decide. This is a unique case with unique circumstances. Given that he's not the average person at target practice, but instead he's on a movie set, people are paid to make sure that the weapons are safe, that they're not loaded with live rounds. Is it a sufficient defense for him to say that because he was reliant upon the armorer and that they told him that the weapon was cold, it was not loaded? That's going to be a question for the jury. I would say that this is a toss-up. Because he does have that defense that most of us would never have, which is paid professionals were on the scene and told me it was a cold weapon.
And finally, what's another example of this type of negligent homicide that a lot of our viewers might be able to relate to? Is texting and driving, is that something similar?
Absolutely. And if you were in New Mexico and you text and drive and thereby cause a death, or you aren't paying attention to traffic and you pass over the center line and you didn't mean it, you were just distracted, but you hit another vehicle and you caused a death, the standard in New Mexico is much lower than criminally negligent homicide in New York. They have involuntary manslaughter, which just states that if you were engaged in a lawful act like driving, which might result in death. It can always result in death if you misdrive, you don't drive correctly, and you are not exercising due care and circumspection, that could be a felony offense if it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Local defense attorney Barry Covert. Barry, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.